he called the agreement the People's Agenda, a plan of action. And so on September 25th, 215 participants from 193 nations signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals. And it was clear that the goals are interdependent. They're not individual silos. Each needs to be implemented to actually eliminate poverty. And the other point was that the implementation requires collaboration within countries, cooperation among countries. And the goals are global and they apply to all member countries. At the September 2015 gathering, President Obama said that these goals he recognizes apply to us here in the United States, and he will do his part to see to it that the goals are a framework for policies in the United States and for cooperating with other countries. And so maybe we'll show a video now, if we can, work time, Mark, of the list of the 17 development goals, rather than have me read them.
We'll try this again, and if we have issues, we'll just have to close it out.
Then I'll read them. If we have issues, I'll read them. If we have issues.
Yeah, maybe it would be best.
I'm going to give us that ability.
Yeah, why don't we just go on?
Okay,
Yeah.
He should be able to share video.
Oh,
It's not set up.
what's
Yeah,
the
just
plan?
Go ahead and read them.
Oh, I should read them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The first goal is to end poverty in all its forms. The second goal is to end hunger, achieve food security. The third goal is to ensure healthy lives and promote the well-being for all. There's some echo.
Yeah, there's somebody talking here. Sherry? No? Oh, there. Okay. All right, keep going.
The fourth goal is ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. The fifth goal is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. The sixth goal is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation. The seventh goal is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy. The eighth goal is promote sustained and inclusive economic growth, decent employment for all. The ninth goal is to build a resilient infrastructure and promote sustainable industrialization and foster innovation. The 10th goal is reducing inequality within and among countries. The 11th goal is make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe and resilient and sustainable. The 12th goal is ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. 13th goal is take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. 14th, conserve and sustainable use of the oceans, the seas, and maritime resources for sustainable development. And the 15th is protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, manage forests, combat desertification. And the 16th is promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, inclusive institutions at all levels. And the 17th goal was strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So these are 17 sustainable development goals to end poverty. And as I mentioned, they are interconnected. They are time doesn't allow us to go into the statistics, but the goals are a roadmap, a vision with action, interconnected goals. You know, if you look at goal 2, for example, hunger, every day in the news, we're made aware of of hunger issues globally and domestically. More than 820 million people are experiencing hunger globally. Afghanistan, 72% live below the poverty level. Malnutrition is one of the highest in the world. And food insecurity exists here in Milwaukee as well, as we certainly become more visible during the pandemic and dependent on food pantries and meal programs, and how the meal programs had to close because of the pandemic. And so hunger is obviously connected to goals that relate to goal 3 on health, or goal 4 on quality education. Quality education, goal 4, is the key that allows many of the other goals to be achieved. Education helps to reduce inequality and reach gender equality. More than half of the children that are not enrolled in schools live in sub-Saharan Africa. Girls still face in developing countries gender barriers that prevent them from entering the primary and secondary schools. And so there's, and with the refugee camps, the disparities, refugees and the camps within a country and the camps outside the countries, that the disparities and inequalities in providing educational opportunities has increased. And so these goals are all connected. You can't achieve one without the other. And ultimately, goal 13 addresses climate change, and that's affecting all the goals. And more and more, we're becoming aware of the impact of climate change. And we're fortunate to have people in the greater Milwaukee area who are knowledgeable about it. Famine is a driving force of migration besides the violent conflicts. So we're faced with an awareness of the impact that climate change is having on all these goals. And Global 16, basically said that there can be no peace without justice. Unless you achieve these other goals, we're not going to have the peace that we desire. Many of the internal conflicts are the result of people attempting not only power to keep their power, but it's also an effort to get a piece of the pie, as we say, the resources. So the institutions don't always recognize or don't acknowledge the role that justice is playing, and how they themselves, how the institutions need to reflect justice to the people. And Global 17 calls for global partnerships. Public and private partnerships are needed. No country can do it alone. Some leaders of countries need these goals in order to convince the folks that gender equality is an issue that all countries are concerned about. This helps protect them and their efforts to achieve equity. And no humanitarian agency can do it alone. As I mentioned, the World Food Program won the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize. And the World Food Program collaborates with UNICEF and other UN agencies and the humanitarian agencies of the world. So those are the goals, interconnectedness. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of excitement at the signing of the agreement in 2015. There was a belief that real progress could be made by 2030. Now, there is a concern about how much will actually be done because of the political events, the pandemic, and the rising effects of climate warming during the past years. When President Trump spoke in 2016, former President Trump, he defended an American first policy and encouraged other nations to assume the same stance with their agendas. He withdrew or planned to withdraw from a number of global alliances. And there was a rise in human rights abuses by authoritarian dictators. So we found ourselves in a situation where the political dynamics were impeding the implementation of the goals and the collaboration that was needed. And so For the UN to carry out its mission and work, there is a need for developing and maintaining public support in each of the member countries. This educational and advocacy work is carried out through the United Nations Association in a number of countries. The United Nations Association, USA, here in the United States, obviously, has 20,000 members across 20 chapters in cities and universities. Our local chapter is called the United Nations Association of Greater Milwaukee. All volunteers there's monthly chapter meetings are held around issues related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Programs highlight the global and local connections. During the past few months, we have held programs on racism and inequality, global and local hunger issues, and gender issues. Issues related to the defense spending also receive attention. There's no peace without justice. And members of the Cameroon community have asked the United Nations Association locally to join them in meeting with legislators to call upon Congress and the UN to act on human rights abuses in Cameroon. And so we meet with legislators, our Congress people, about issues that pertain to supporting the work of the UN and specific issues, military spending, hunger, whatever it may be. The board and members of the UNA, our chapter, are about informing the public and advocating for the work of the UN. It's very important that we continue to educate folks and make them aware that we are global citizens, and to do this at an early age. Our chapter supports the Model UN programs in schools, and we have a major effort called the United Nations. We work in partnership with the Milwaukee Public Schools to develop the United Nations Schools of International Learning. And the United Nations Schools for International Learning involves 11, 12 schools, elementary schools where the students study a country and the Sustainable Development Goals and their application to those countries. And then at the end of the year, like this past, not this year, we had to cancel 2020, but 2019, or rather, and we've had 1,000 students gather at the Panther Center arena. 1,000 students gathered, and they displayed their work on the countries and what they learned about those countries through the prism of Sustainable Development Goals, gender equality education. It's a very impressive program in partnership with the Milwaukee Public Schools. And again, we will not have a public gathering, but we will have a program in May, and details we've made available. But it's called, again, the United Nations Schools of International Learning. And it's a model for around the country. So the United Nations Association of the United States, USA, asked us recently, asked chapters to advocate in 5 areas. One is asking us to advocate for the fact that the UN, advocate for funding for the UN. The United States currently owes $1 billion in dues to the UN and peacekeeping efforts. We are the largest contributor to those efforts. Secondly, it asked us to support efforts to end systemic racism and racial justice, both within Congress policies and our own locally. Thirdly, support the World Health Organization. Fourth, urge Congress to support United Nations Population Fund. And fifth, efforts to fight climate change. So again, 5 areas, we provide a framework for us to contact our legislators and work with them on it. So I'll bring this to a close. I know there might be comments, and some of you in this gathering are much more knowledgeable than I am on some of these areas. So feel free to raise comments or questions.
Thank you,
And
Jack.
reflecting on.
Thank you,
and
Jack.
reflect-
I'd like to draw everybody's attention to the
Oh.
chat room,
Okay.
that there's the place to put questions there. And also there's uh, some information about the next United Nations Association of Milwaukee event, which is speaks to the question, how do we respond to today's challenges, which is exactly what Jack is talking about this morning, and that the information of that event is on the is in the chat room.
And thanks, Dan, again. And so in closing, thank you for making us aware of the chat. And as he mentioned, there's a United Nations Association, our chapter on April 10th on a Saturday at 10 o'clock is going to have a program on, we give out 4 awards called the Global Citizens Awards. And we were going to do it in 2020. And obviously we had to cancel our April luncheon. And so we're going to do it this April. And the 4 recipients will share their experiences and insights from their involvement with race, racial issues, school boards, education issues, job issues, immigration. And the 4 recipients are Pardeep, and also Annie Woodward, and then we have
Ken Green.
Ruth Zabrinsky
Mhm.
and Ken Greening.
Mhm.
And so that's going to be our program on April 10th. And you're all welcome to join us for that. But I'd like to close on the importance of recognizing the social development goals. They're interconnected to eliminate poverty. And I could not help but think how the Poor People's Campaign these past few years have promoted interconnected goals. Reverend Barber connected poverty, health, education, housing, jobs, and militarism. Black Lives Matter also connected issues. President Biden's American Rescue Plan also connects economic, social, and the health impact of the COVID-19. And some people would say the money doesn't go to addressing COVID. It addresses the whole picture. It also is connected to various components of our society. So each of us are called to do what we can to be open and collaborate and support others in their efforts to address the goals, sustainable development goals as they see them. So again, I go back to, there's no peace without justice. When you dream alone, it's only a dream, but when you dream together, it's the beginning of reality. And then the fact that without a vision, people perish. So thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Jack, very much.
Appreciate that, Jack. I wanted to ask a question.
Well, before you begin, Dan, there is a question from Dennis. He's been kind of waiting, so I wonder if we could do that. And then hold on there with your question too. Hi, Dennis.
Oh, thank you very much for this presentation. You know, as ecologists looking over those 17 goals, if you're going to provide people with a lot more food and make them a lot healthier, and you don't limit the population numbers, it's going to be a disaster. So can you say something about what the UN goals might be about limiting the human population?
I really can't. We have some members of our chapter who are really working on that issue. But I think the question is being able to support the population fund without the restrictions of family planning, and to be open to whatever is necessary to help address the issues of population. So you're probably much more knowledgeable than I am in that particular one.
About a micro issue, Jack, is what is your thoughts of the new ambassador to the UN? She has a Wisconsin connection. Are you familiar with her background at all?
Well, her name is Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, And what's interesting about the appointment is that President Biden appointed a career diplomat who has worked many years in issues of diplomacy, and that she also focused on Africa and economic and social development in Africa. And she's also going to be the representative of President Biden in the Security Council. So well qualified.
Mhm.
Are there other issues regarding the UN that they've got a lot of press, or the United States has left the Human Rights Council? I believe that happened only last year.
Yeah, former President Trump, eliminated participation in that, and also the World Health Program. President Biden has begun to restore those connections. So we will be related to the Human Rights Council. We'll not be formally a member right yet, but we're going to be at the meeting, at the table, and restoring our participation in the World Food Program. And as you know, the United Nations has put together international treaties through a lot of effort, mediation, getting countries to agree on treaties. So there are 9 treaties, international human rights treaties, that the UN formulated. Only 3 have been ratified by the US. And President Biden is, as you know, going to be, we're restoring our participation in some of those areas. The Paris Peace Agreement, trying to deal with Iran, a nuclear disarmament. So it's going to be an effort, because there's a core group of people in our country who oppose relating to the UN and accepting directions from the UN or vision of the UN. A concrete example of that was, a number of examples, but one of them certainly the Convention on the Rights of the Child, protection of the rights of women. I remember in 2008, the rights of persons with disabilities. And it was a treaty that the UN used the United States model on how to protect the rights of people with disabilities. And so they used that model of how we as the United States have been formulating our goals in that area, put together international treaty, and countries signed on to it. And then the United States Congress, when they were discussing signing on, even former Senator, I went blank. I just went blank. The senator who lost his arm in World War II and ran for president, Senator Dole came, thinking that'd be the time to celebrate, and Congress would not accept it because it came from the UN. So a lot of work needs to be done for us to express support for the mission and work of the UN.
And speaking of other human rights, are you familiar, Jack, with the council that then Secretary Pompeo put together, redefining human rights?
I'm not sure where that all went, because now it's changed, but I know there was, again, it was an effort to eliminate other countries.
There's one more question from Bernice. Are UN chapters from cities or states?
The chapters are, can be in the city, it can be in the counties, it could be wherever a number of members make up a chapter, and universities have their chapters. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, we had a collaboration. So the state, it used to be Waukesha, Greater Milwaukee, Dane County. Dane County has a chapter, and there are other chapters up north. But right now, currently in Wisconsin, we only have Dane County and the Greater Milwaukee.
Well,
There
great.
was a statewide network at one time.
If there's no, are there any other questions at this point? Dennis?
Yes, about 25 years ago, I gave a talk in support of the Earth Charter. I think it's a wonderful document that the UN put out. Is that still being promoted, or have the goals been subsumed into the other goals that you mentioned?
I could not answer that, but certainly the other goals reflect the effort to protect the earth and use the resources wisely and equitably.
Yeah, that was such a wonderful document. Gorbachev had been involved with it. They had people from everywhere, and it's the most comprehensive document I've seen, and it seemed to have incorporated so many of the things that you mentioned. I try to mention it at every talk that I give on the environment. So I'm just wondering
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
how it fits in with, like I said, these other goals. And I think the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh had set up their entire curriculum based on the Earth Charter. This was about 20 years ago, though. I don't know what the status is right now.
I don't know. Another remark that you brought to mind was Barbara Lee, Representative Barbara Lee in Congress is trying to get Congress to look upon the goals as a vision and an action plan for the US. And she's trying to get Gwen Morris signed on and others, but to hold these goals up as an action plan and the fact that they're all integrated.
All right. Well, thank you, Jack. It was great. It was great talk. We look forward to any other issues that come up.
And I'd like to thank you also, Dan, for arranging this, and Mark for struggling through the technology. That's always so difficult. It's not easy, and that's happened before. And I welcome anybody who would like to become part of the chapter to certainly contact us, and Dan can contact Dan, myself, or others if you'd like to become members of the chapter, so that we can expand the support base for the UN. Thank you.
I just want to mention that, Jack, your email and phone number are on the chat. So if people want to contact you directly, you might have some people doing that. And there is a late incoming question from Camille, and then maybe, what do you think, Dan? That might be the end
Sure.
then, or
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Well, okay. So Camille has a question. Oh, you got to unmute, Camille. That's one of my worst things to remember. Camille, there you go.
Okay, I just was curious as to one of the goals. Has a goal been set to increase people's access to internet?
I don't put the broadband as certainly, as we talk about equity among institutions and the network that's necessary. I would think that globally there's an effort to expand broadband, because that's part of the equality issues right now. As you know, that the lack of access to the internet contributes to the hindrance of any economic and social growth in those countries.
Right.
So that's a modern tool that's part of the equality issue.
Right.
Thank you for the question.
I didn't hear that mentioned. And it's also high-speed Wi-Fi is an issue. Broadband just isn't enough.
Yes, no. I think we're all learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, great, Jack. I just want to ask Lorraine, who's the next forum speaker for next week?
Sure. The next forum speaker is Josh Call, our Attorney General for Wisconsin, and he has been scheduled by Mark Miller. The topic is public safety, top priority. There's many top priorities, but this one will be at the top on March 28th.
Thank you again, Jack. It was a great morning, great information. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for attending.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Jack.
Will have the ability to see the transcript, the closed captioning. But people on YouTube will not see it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. So.
All right, should I turn this live stream